to Trump campaign economic advisor Steve Moore on exactly how this works. Because, Steve, if he's talking $500 billion to $1 trillion and the American public is tapped out already, then where does the cash come from for the fund?
Well, Charles, I have not talked to Donald Trump about this issue of infrastructure, so I'm talking here now about my own opinion rather than what the campaign is doing. And if he were to ask me about this, I'd say a couple things. First of all, the infrastructure crisis in America is not public infrastructure, it's private infrastructure. The companies are just not spending money, and we're not getting the kind of private sector spending that's the real source of growth of the economy. That's number one. Number two, what happened to all the money over the last 8 years? There's been a massive increase in infrastructure spending under Barack Obama, and nobody knows where the money is. We still have potholes. We still have, a lousy port system. We still have bridges that are in a state of collapse. And I think he has to take it to the Democrats and say, you want to spend all this new money, but you can't tell us what you did with the money that we already spent.
Well, we know there's a lot of quid pro quo, there's typical cronyism and all that stuff. But another problem, Steve, is the bureaucracy, the layers of bureaucracy out there. I mean, ultimately, if you really want this cash to ever go to where it's got to go, how does a new president smash that to bits and you've got these guys who've insulated themselves on D.C. and on a local level, and everyone's getting their own palms greased along the way.
You got it. The perfect example is the $70 billion high-speed rail system in California, the railroad to nowhere that's costing taxpayers, tens of billions of dollars. Now, one of the things to think about and answer your question is, and I'm going to tell Donald Trump this, let's try to find ways where the private sector will build this stuff. I mean, I live in Virginia. We have private toll roads. That didn't require a penny of taxpayer money. The private sector built the roads. They charge for it with tolls. There are all sorts of innovative ways you can bring the private sector in so we're not going to bankrupt the government. I mean, after all, we're already $19 trillion in debt. To talk about a massive increase in borrowing right now, I don't think that's something the American people are going to go for.
Do me a favor when you do speak to Trump about it. I'd like to get one toll booth on the George Washington Bridge. Ask how much that'll cost me.
Okay.
I got it. I'm looking at taking care of the grandkids, the kids, the grandkids, the great-grandkids. Give me one booth. That's all I want, one booth. Hey, before I let you go, though, this used to be a Democrat sort of issue. Steve, well, I think Steve, this used to be a Democrat issue, infrastructure spending. Ultimately, it may get you votes, and we do need to fix our crumbling infrastructure. But longer term, you've got some other ideas, too, particularly with jobs, to spark this economy.
Oh, of course we do. And incidentally, one thing I forgot to mention, infrastructure, what Donald Trump should lead with is the Keystone Pipeline. Say, Hillary, you keep talking about we need more infrastructure. We got a project that is ready to go. It's not going to cost the taxpayers a penny, and your State Department held this up for 5 years, and it's still being held up. But, yeah, you got to do, smart infrastructure spending, but you got to do tax reform, regulatory relief. And, by the way, regulatory relief will substantially reduce the cost of these infrastructure projects. There's something called the Davis-Bacon Act. I know you've heard of that before. That basically requires union salaries on all these infrastructure projects. That's not what the private sector does. They do it for 30% less cost than the government does. That's a rip-off for the taxpayers.
The 179,000 jobs we saw at ADP, we get the government number on Friday. Some economists are saying that's good enough. That's enough to sustain the recovery and actually build upon. Guys like Mark Zandi saying Hillary Clinton's economic plan will create a lot of jobs. I mean, you do have some economists who are saying we're in okay shape right now.
You know who disagrees with that, Charles? The voters do. That's the problem. I mean, Hillary can say it's morning in America as long as she wants to, and Mark Zandi can say whatever he wants, but just look at what the American people are saying. They think this American economy is totally stalled. They're financially stressed out. And if Hillary wants to run on the message of everything's wonderful with the economy, she ought to do that. She can run, but she can't hide from this. I heard your previous discussion. Trump, day after day after day, has to pound her on this abysmal economic performance. We've downshifted to 1% growth. Presidents and parties don't get reelected with 1% growth, Charles.
Yeah, there's absolutely no doubt about that. And finally, I know you're like the ultimate diplomat. The stuff that's going on within the party, the fighting and the endorsements. What do you? I mean, that detracts, doesn't it? Detract from the ultimate message, the easier message, doesn't it?
Of course it does. You know, look, Paul Ryan's a hero of mine, and Donald Trump is a hero of mine. I hate to see this internecine warfare within the party. You know, we have the most important election I really believe since 1980, and let's get our act together. Let's fight together. You look at what Donald Trump is talking about on taxes, and Paul Ryan is talking about taxes, regulation. There's not a whole lot of difference. What are they arguing about, Charles?
I don't know. All right, Steve Moore, you're one of the best and one of my favorites. Thanks a lot, appreciate it.
Thanks for calling me a diplomat. I've never been called that before.
Hey, listen, you got every other title. Why not?